On Monday the 4th of June 2012, the Diamond Jubilee concert was set against a spectacular backdrop of Buckingham Palace, celebrating Her Majesty the Queen's 60-year reign. Described by the Times newspaper as a triumph of illumination, the concert, produced by the BBC, was one of the most spectacular shows ever staged in the UK. In July of 2011, I received a call from Robbie Williams, Productions that is, not the singer, inviting me to design the lighting for the Diamond Jubilee concert to be held on June the 4th the following summer. Unlike my previous design for the Golden Jubilee in 2002, where I was responsible for the light, projection and fireworks show around the facade of Buckingham Palace, this time the concert, rather than being in the Palace Garden, would be staged in front of the Palace around the Queen Victoria Memorial. I wonder if the gardeners had had a word about that one. Architect Mark Fisher designed the roof structure, which had to be as transparent as physically possible to create minimal obstruction of the palace for our live and television audiences, and so we set about integrating lighting into the structure to lessen the impact of lighting fixtures on the design. The Queen Victoria Memorial has a nautical theme. It was built as a memorial to the Empress of India at the height of British naval power, and the roof design saluted this. The timber beams were large and expressive, and the transparent skins between them suggested sails. I approached Chris Ewington at iPix, who in my mind is one of the leaders of the pack in terms of LED development, to discuss what fixtures might be suitable to inset into the roof beams, and I decided that we would integrate 80 BB4 units into the beams with a further 30 linear 2-foot battens in triple boxes at the end of the beams as blinders. The new linear range have an enhanced output, a new green LED which is very vibrant, and a white element as well. Just what I needed for a compact, bright, TV-friendly source. I made heavy use of WYSIWYG, not only for pre-programming, but also for visualizations before the roof was built, to animate our design and make our intentions clear to the most unimaginative accountants. We decided to have one run of truss around the LED screen as a backlight and effect source, and had to weigh the use of mini-beam trussing with motors above or standard trussing with motors inside, which we went for as it allowed us to get the rig higher into the roof and away from the LED screen background. I needed a compact, bright spot and wash for this position and specified 36 Claypaky Alpha Wash 700s, which are the same physical size as their 300s, but with a light output of a 1200, and 36 of Claypaky's Alpha Spot QW0800, the quiet wide optics, with its amazing output and zoom range and the unique ability to keep gobos in sharp focus, both on performers nearby, but also in the air and on the audiences hundreds of feet away. My choice of equipment for my designs is always determined by what comes out of the front of a fixture rather than what is written on the side. And over the last 5 years, Claypaky have established the Alpha range and innovated with industry-changing products such as the beams and Sharpies. Many of the world's leading lighting designers, programmers and technicians have come to see Claypaky products in a new light. On top of the roof beams, we needed a weatherproof colour-changing fixture that we would not be able to reach once the roof membranes were pulled into place. And I specified 12 Colour Kinetics Colour Reach Power Core for their reliability and for their performance. These lit the Queen Victoria Memorial in all its newly clean glory, and the Gold Angel inevitably became a lighting focal point for various cues during the concert. A further run of truss around the monument itself sported 60 Claypaky Sharpies pointing up as a collar of light for the monument. That's one for each year of Her Majesty's reign. And we placed 60 Alpha Beam 1500 in a complete circle around the whole stage to create aerial effects and to frame the performance area in light from the helicopter shots. The original lighting design specified 60 synchrolights in a complete circle around the stage to create a singular wow lighting effect. Unfortunately, the budget would allow only one major effect, and it was decided to go with the 3D mapping and building projection, which turned out to be a good decision given the praise it received, though I was disappointed personally to lose my light diamond. Maybe next time. One of the major considerations was the weather, and the replacement circle of light Alpha Beam 1500s had to be bagged at the first sign of rain, as did the floor lights, and the crew did a great job keeping the kit reasonably dry. It was, however, very frustrating for Tim and Alex as the programmers struggled to have the lights online and uncovered long enough to do the focuses. The stage became rather crowded when the decision was made to load all the different acts' equipment onto the stage together, then remove equipment once the artist had performed, rather than trying to change sets during the concert. You can see some of the forest of equipment that was behind these guys. Negerth's Julian Lavender was in charge of this operation, and he and his team performed a small miracle with not one awkward moment as each band change was complete. No small feat considering the world-class musicians involved who demand perfection in their instruments and equipment. You push a sine wave too far, and like most of us, it'll go out of tune. I did manage to squeeze in 10 more CP QWA 800s as floor lights, along with some chrome par kickers, in lead Durham Frost of course, and 6 Union jacketed Sharpies, donated to the concert by Clay Packy in recognition of their British market. The stage roof could not support much in the way of equipment other than what we had integrated into the roof beams, so all our key lights had to come from technical towers some distance away. From 4 front of house towers, I specified 32 Alpha Beam 700 and 4 Alpha Beam 1500 as the stage front of house wash, with 20 Synchrolite SXL 73 as large wash lights for audience lighting and effects. 5 Robert Juliet Lancelot and 4 Gladiator follow spots completed our key lighting, and TV lighting director Steve Nolan did a great job in keeping faces effectively lit throughout daylight, dusk and darkness from these less than ideal throws and angles. The Royal Box was illuminated with 32 Colour Kinetics IntelliWhite blasts, which allowed us to vary the colour temperature of the white lighting on our VIP guests and Her Majesty as the evening unfolded. I kept a careful eye on this level, as Her Majesty explained that she missed some of the Golden Jubilee due to her key lights being a little too bright. Oops. The amazing and creative LED stage screen content was created by Miguel Ribeiro and his associate Paul Clutterbuck. All the ideas and storyboards that Miguel created had to be run past the creative team and the BBC executives to be policed for artistic merit and appropriate political content. Then it went to the artists and their creative teams. Then it came back to be changed. In some instances it was like a good long rally at Wimbledon. And this was for artists who'd actually decided what they were going to sing. Some of the stars only decided their set list on the day. This was astounding work by a patient and very creative professional who really was up against it in a big way, but I heard not one complaint. So thank you, Miguel. There were 2 aspects of the event lighting which I had some experience of from the Golden Jubilee. The lighting of the Mall, which was achieved with 170 chrome par cans affixed to special brackets on the flagpoles along the Mall, and big thanks to Robbie Williams, who went from pillar to post with my photo of the Mall 10 years ago to obtain permission from the flagpole guardians to use their poles once more. The other aspect was of course the lighting of the palace facade and the inclusion of 3D mapping for effective video projection once the sun had finally set. I felt more like a royal astrologer than a lighting designer as I prepared a detailed running order with precise daylight levels throughout the evening to demonstrate exactly which artist would have a dark enough canvas for the BBC's video mapping aspirations. Special thanks must go to Steve Greetham and Andy Joyce of XL Video, with whom I determined the minimum of projectors that would fit the budget but also guarantee at least 200 lux onto the palace screen. These sequences would involve a delicate balance between stage lighting and video image, and it was gratifying to see the amazing work of Sam Pattinson and his team of visual artists garner so much praise and interest after the event on a system that we had so carefully designed. The system we specified, and which XL Events supplied, comprised of 6 towers with 6 Barco FLM HD 20K projectors on each, fed by 12 Barco Image Pros and 2 Lightwear DVI matrices. XL Events also supplied the monitoring used by D3 Technologies for the video mapping and the playback. The stage screen was made up of around 600 PixLED FX11 LED tiles. More recognition goes to Jim Douglas at Projected Image, who kindly supplied the Union Jack gobos at a very patriotic price. We could not have lit the pomp and circumstance of the finale with Her Majesty on stage without this image. Of course, for the other 3 hours of the show, and at points where pyro and fire were too bright to allow the projections to be effective, I had to have the ability to floodlight the facade. In 2002, I achieved this with multiple Mac 2K washes, which had to be black bin bagged every night due to our summer weather. Nothing changed there then. And whilst being a great workhorse, the forecourt of the palace, i.e. the view from the windows of Her Majesty and her VIP guests, was a bit of a mess to say the least. So having discovered a new fixture to achieve massive coloured floodlighting, and first using it on the New Year's Eve event at the London Eye earlier this year, I specified 30 Synchrolite Arena colours for the main wash and 32 Alpha Wash 1500 to pick out the pillars. The Arena colour is basically a scroller and a dowser that fits on the front of a Philips Arena Vision fixture, but with a few innovative and unique features. And in 2 groups of 15 to crossfade the scrollers, each group of 15 sources could throw 2,000 lux onto the facade. A new reflector almost doubles the output of the standard floodlight, and flexible dichroic filters with heat welds allow even saturate colours to be projected for unlimited periods. Beam control is with holographic lenses, which allow very high transmission compared to glass lenses or frosts, and we use 60 by 10 degree and a 20 degree in the centre to create our red, white and blue effect. They're also weatherproof. The control system for the event came from Grandam A2, with Associate LD Tim Routledge as lead programmer, and Alex Passmore handling key lighting for Steve.
Many thanks to Durham for warming up the crowd for me. I take it going second makes me the headline act, and in the case of this particular event, that means I won't make up my mind on the set list until I deliver it, so excuse me as I muddle through it. For those that don't know me, I'm a lighting designer and programmer working mainly in television live music, but across major events and the occasional dabble back into theatre where I started. I do a little bit of video content design, and I'm a director of Grandpa, which is a specialist control company renting out and selling Grandam A control systems. We're a specialist in that side. The summer of 2012 has been unprecedented in terms of events, large-scale events in this country, and I'm very fortunate to have been involved in the 2 biggest shows of this year. As Associate Lighting Designer to Durham Marenghi for the Jubilee, and also as lead lighting programmer for Patrick Woodruff on the opening and closing ceremonies of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. An epic summer, and one that has only finished 48 hours ago. Durham invited me to be part of his Jubilee team back in 2011 when he won the project, and coincidentally I had just had the call to be part of London 2012 and possibly had to make up my mind between 2 shows. No dates were confirmed really for starting dates for either show, but I wasn't sure whether I could have been able to achieve both. Diaries never work out this way in our world, everything always clashes. But as luck would have it, I was extremely lucky, and my contract to work on London 2012 started the following morning after finishing the concert at the Palace. My initial role in the project was to start in late April of this year, as LED screens had been added to the stage design, and I was keen that we had bespoke video content and not generic wallpaper. This was too high profile a show for splodge, the standard content we all have on our drives as programmers to get us out of a mess on site. Following a meeting at BBC TV Centre, the production team and Durham were keen to use a regular video contributor that Durham has already mentioned, Miguel Ribeiro. Miguel and I work quite often together on shows. We've done things from the Royal Variety performance to the Concert for Heroes at Twickenham Stadium. Miguel works with his business partner Paul Clutterbuck, and together create fantastic ideas that have real humour and eye-catching design. Moreover, they are extremely quick at turning ideas around and working to extremely tight deadlines. My work takes me to quite a few multi-act music shows, and there are 3 distinct areas to getting content creation right. The first is artist liaison, especially on these large shows when you've got 20 or so headline acts that all need conversations. There's TV producers, and everyone has their say. There's design and creation, and the show playback. The artist liaison on these productions is notoriously tricky and time-consuming, and this is a role that I've done several times before, so this was added to my responsibilities, effectively working as a producer for the content, whilst Miguel and Paul worked hard on design and creation. Miguel's an unusual breed of content creators, as he's not able to create the content, but is a highly experienced programmer. So he also programmed and ran the show on the night, whilst also making changes right up to the show. For both of us, the choice of media server is pretty simple. PRG's M-Box Extreme. It's feature-packed, it's stable, and a highly powerful media device. Plus, it has bi-directional connection between the desk and the server. And not once in all the years of using it have we seen one fall over on a show. They are extremely popular in the US and gaining ground in the UK. I've programmed them several times, and without doubt, this is the server of choice. I'm just going to skip ahead just past this. Here we go. On consoles, though, we do differ, and Miguel is well versed on the PRG V676, and this combination is very powerful when used with the M-Box. Miguel and I had a brainstorm in my kitchen at the start of May, and then he had a month to create the numerous full-length video pieces required for each song of each artist. However, what notoriously happens on these shows is that due to a high number of television appearances and performances, the band's management and creatives may not be interested in discussing their visuals at all until the very last minute. And no matter of deadline you set, there is always going to be changes at the last minute. The essential thing is to get as much done as quickly as possible, so you have the ability to take on last-minute requests. Within a week, we had storyboards. You can see here examples of Miguel's storyboards. For every act, an agreement in principle of the direction of each piece with both Durham and the show's producers at the BBC. This show has another layer also. The palace and the producers needed to ensure there'd be nothing that would look out of place in our regal setting. In order to maximise the time Miguel had to render content, it was my role to look after the meetings with the producers so that he could not be dragged away from his steaming Mac render engines. It's also poignant to point out that we had several VT montages of the Queen, some of unseen footage from her own archive that had to be inserted into the show, and also within our content. It was generally picture within picture. These were generally done with beautiful gilt frames that Miguel created and were played live from the truck and received as video input to the server. Miguel also had to direct content straight to the screens as well for IMAG throughout the show, and when they were played on the far left and right of the screen configuration. From a technical point of view, it was a fairly simple setup, albeit with the width of the video greatly exceeding the resolution of the high definition standard. The set was comprised of 5 LED screens with a total width of 2,800 by 400 pixels. If you see at the top of the slide there, those are the various screens, and they wrapped round our curved stage. The far screens left A and E generally showed IMAG, but there were various elements in the show where the director didn't want to see IMAG, and Miguel had various cues to remove that during the show. So the video was created as one single 2,800 by 400 pixel film, which was split on the fly by the media server into the 5 parts that the processors on stage could receive. So while the M-Box was outputting 2,800 as you see it, it was also then splitting it and turning it into the content you see below, which was received by XL Video and put onto the screens, so that all the screens could fit between one 1920 by 1080 raster. So that's video. But how do we go about programming over 30 music numbers in a week and try to come up with as much variety as possible? Unlike theatre work, it is often the programmer on these shows that breaks the show down and creates the cue structure. First off, I always create an iTunes playlist, and in the first instance, this is generally the radio edits of the singles of the musics in the show. I go and download, or I go to YouTube and find the clips, because nowadays most acts are using Pro Tools and creating special versions of their songs for the night. So the first thing I do is go and learn the music on whatever version I can lay my hands on. Quite often the running order is still being finalised, but I get to know what I can, and I have it on my iPod and in the car for the week, especially leading up to rehearsals. It drives my wife mad, especially if it's not her cup of tea. 2 years ago, I lit the Nolan's reunion tour, a bad month for music in the Routledge household. The next step is to break the song down. These are all the possible cue points in a song, but not necessarily all the points we will use depending on time. I use a program called Inscribe. This is a fantastic utility when working with timecode to create a script of cues, but also in this case very handy for generating a cue list. It's real simple. You can play back any music file or video file, hit insert on your keyboard or via a USB foot switch to create a cue point and annotate it. When working with music, this software becomes really handy as you simply click on the timecode point in brackets and it will play from that point. So if you're working with a particularly tricky drum breakdown that you're trying to get back in your head while programming, you keep clicking the time and it keeps playing that little section of music for you. As an aside, this software also lets you adjust timecodes, create videos of the cue points, and can be exported in many ways. On my work on War of the Worlds, the tour, we had over 5,000 lighting cues, all time-coded thanks to this program. Also for this show, I used another piece of software. I exported the song structures from Inscribe to a clever little program called FFP2. It was created by Matt Peel, who is one of the main programmers at the Royal Shakespeare Company and an all-round genius. He also created some other utilities for me for other work over the summer, but that's another story. If you're interested in any of his clever little programs and utilities for programmers, go to www.mattpeel.com. Using FFP2, this created 30 macros for the console that automatically generated a cue list on the console for me. I had 30 faders, all labelled ready with the song name, the cue list, and fade times, all ready. Half the battle won. This is a preferred way of working with me with a number of designers. It creates a cue structure and lets you know where you're heading. You know where the finishing point is. You know exactly how much work you've got to do. Of course, all these cues are blank and some way to go, but it's a great start. The show had many sides to it, and as Durham has mentioned, a lot of stakeholders, various lighting positions, and endless meetings. To this end, the 8 days preceding the show meant we were both rehearsing in LH2 whilst the rig was loading in on site. My main role was to keep the pre-programming together alongside rehearsals using WYSIWYG, which freed up Durham to move between all the various facets of the show and keep tabs on the build. We would regroup each day and make adjustments to the wig drawing as things had changed on site, and to our own schedule as we went along. I've rehearsed in LH2 many times, but normally with the full rig hung. This time it was myself, Miguel and Durham in the virtual world, and a very empty studio, apart from the backline, the orchestra and the headline talent. The crucial thing for me on all of these shows is to get one look in per song. If you can get one look in for every song, you have a show, no matter how much the show goes wrong. I generally knock a colour look in for each song. This is the blue one with rippling gobos, this is the UV storm, etc, etc. Once this is in the desk, you can begin to flesh it out. I adopt the 15-minute rule. If the show has 30 songs, you can spend an hour per song at the start. You're never going to get through the whole thing. So I give each one 15 minutes, and I get as far as I can. That's the second pass. The first one is to put the look in, the second pass is 15 seconds per song. 30 songs is 7.5 hours of programming, a lot of time. Every time I get a spare 15 minutes, you have another pass at the song, and so on and so on. It means you always have a show. And if you get any extra time, you can have another chance to refine it. Now, it wasn't just me programming the show. My role was the main stage looks, but this is only part of the story. We brought in Alex Passmore, a great programmer who I work with a lot, who came in to look after the audience system and to balance the broadcast, key lights, inhibits, etc. Alex would firstly copy the colour looks from my songs and match them into his audience system, so there is some cohesion. The pretty straightforward part of what we had to do. It's the rehearsals and the show that Alex and any TV operator really comes into play, especially on shows like this. Working closely with the TV LD, in this case Steve Nolan, to balance the show where possible using either additive or subtractive inhibits or group masters as they're called on the MA. The best thing about the MA is the networking, and I can see when Alex is inhibiting me. If I know there's a big effect coming up and he's got me inhibited too much and it's something we really want to see, my faders move down, I can take control back. Alex and I have done a lot of this work, working together, and we found the right methods of communication to make this work really well. It's all very much about trust. I've done many shows. I did a big pop show in South Africa, multi-act show, and we had a South African program I'd never worked with. and trying to balance with TV was incredibly tricky, he wasn't knowing what I was doing and vice versa. So it's very much a basis of trust and not wanting to ruin something the other person has done. The third programme on the show was Dave Hill, or Dave the Bastard, as he's affectionately known. His role was both lighting the architecture of the palace and the Madness stage on the roof. Due to cabling restrictions, we weren't able to network Dave's console, so he was standalone. Each day, Dave and I would liaise over colourways for each song, so again there was cohesion on the frontage of the palace. Rehearsals were tricky. Rehearsals were in daylight. There was rain continuously. As Durham has mentioned, the Sharpies on the roof and the floor package, we probably only had those for 10 minutes a day, if that. So everything was very much done using layout views on the console. So I tend to use these with programming. I don't tend to type in fixture numbers into a console at all. I lay out the exact configuration of the fixtures, and just using a lasso technique with a touchscreen stylus, I can grab the fixtures I want. But also while working in daylight, I can see exactly what the light's doing. I know they're on, some are in amber, some are in red. I've got some backlight in white at the bottom there and the washes. And again, on the far left there, you can see the spines of the stage with the LED fixtures. And again, I can see the chases running, so even in daylight when I couldn't see anything going, I could carry on programming the show. This is an example of the information I get from Negev. Fraggle was our chief electrician on the site. There was probably about 50 pages of this document, giving us the exact information we needed, and Fraggle always has a printer on site with him, and this information was constantly updated, so he would literally, every time something changed, would present another bit of paper on the side of the console and walk away quietly to leave me to type it back in. There are many multi-act shows nowadays. In fact, they're 10 a penny. These have been more prevalent in the last 10 years since the previous Queen's Jubilee. For me, what made the show was the location and the architecture of the stage that was created. I've never experienced a deafening roar like it when HRH arrived on stage, more than any headline act in the world. So I guess it was Paul McCartney that was a support act. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And I have to add that as it became apparent that due to the time pressures in rehearsal, my programmer was going to be heavily responsible for most of the lighting of the music segments, I asked our director, Jeff Posner, to change Tim's TV credit from lead programmer to associate lighting designer in recognition of his efforts. The control of the palace compound and the cameo performances by Madness and a duet by Alfie Boe and Renee Fleming on the balcony was on Grand MA1, operated by Dave Hill, with Dennis Gardner as palace crew chief and head technician Jeffrey A. Smith and his teams looking after the synchrolights. The challenge of lighting Madness on the roof, a band with whom I first toured with as a rigger back in 1983, was overcome by footlights and par kickers. 4 more Claypaky QW800s provided backlight and gobo effects, and Paul Young provided 10 of the excellent new Thomas Smartline 4 battens, which, placed along the back of the stage, provided our background and had a Union Jack mapped into them by Dave Hill and various other dynamic colour effects, which worked really well on camera with the homogenised LED cells, not just RGB dots. The projection sequence during Madness really caught everyone's imagination and rightly became the wow factor of the whole evening. Good projection is an exercise in darkness control, and as light and darkness designer, I was able to assist Sam Passinson and his team in rather a unique way. Due to the fact that there were many important guests from around the globe staying in the palace, we were instructed not to shine any light onto the facade after 23:30. Now, as it got dark around 2200, this represented a very serious problem, and there was much talk of boarding up windows in the state guest rooms and other intrusive blackout scenarios when I hit upon a solution. As we had the building mapped so accurately, we were able to create a mask for the Dragonfly 3 that effectively blacked out each window, allowing the projection team to work all night without affecting the denizens of our screen. At the request of BBC Executive Editor Ben Weston and Executive Producer Guy Freeman, We also deployed a further mask to disguise the images during preparation to prevent the public, press and other broadcasters from obtaining any pictures in advance of the concert. For our lighting programming and for similar reasons, we also made extensive use of WYSIWYG to keep our real lighting under a bushel. For such a high-profile event, we eventually managed to keep much of the design a secret, and I have WYSIWYG to thank for that. I imported the various stage and architectural elements into WYSIWYG, and Tim was able to program most of the musical performances at the LH2 rehearsal studio in Acton, whilst Miguel showed the screen content to each artist and their creative teams. I was able to show television director Jeff Posner all of his over 30 camera views and sight line issues such as LED screen heights and the large screen video truck positions were ironed out in the virtual world. It was also of great use to me in the early days of apportioning budgets to present renders to the BBC and to RWP. So for events such as this, with a cast of thousands at the show and millions watching on TV, do you design for Her Majesty and her guests watching in the audience, or the multimedia viewers that will play, pause, rewind and post on YouTube? The short answer is both. If you work with a great team, there's no reason to sacrifice one vision for the other. We were fortunate in having Jeff Posner as TV director, as he scripts everything to the last detail, and this made our lives a lot easier by knowing exactly what everyone will be seeing and when. As you can see, I prefer to use the script, as well, lest I fly off on a tangent and keep you here for hours, thus wasting valuable drinking time. As Jeff explains in our book of the concert, which can be bought at PLASA, with profits going to Light Relief, as director, he had to shoot 43 songs and treat each one of them differently. There's really no substitute for the director and the lighting director sitting down with a running order and run through the whole show. What does this number suggest? Are there any motifs? What should be on the screens, given that we were providing all the content for them? Is there any scope for lighting changes during the number? Sometimes artists give you a clue. Kylie's people said she was being dressed as a pearly queen, and was there anything we could use as a motif with buttons? As this request came a few days before the show itself, and it wasn't just one song, but 5 in an 8-minute medley, Miguel spent 36 hours without a break weaving pictures of buttons into every combination possible. Kylie's folks loved it. The other tool a director has is how he or she shoots it. In the Kylie example, we wanted changes of lighting for each song, but the shots at those moments had to be wide enough to see the changes happen. This is where scripting comes into it. Now, some directors believe in scripting, some don't. The non-scripters like the flexibility of being able to choose shots at random as you see them on the monitor. And indeed, things do occur throughout concerts the whole time that you wouldn't want to miss. Scripting undoubtedly has many advantages. You break the song down into constituent parts, the shots, and allocate a camera to each of those parts, along with the duration measured in bars and beats. So the director would decide that, say, the first line of the verse should be covered in a mid-shot of the lead singer, tightening into a close-up over 3 bars and 3 beats. It's a sort of currency for camera operators. They know how long that shot lasts and can time a move accordingly. On many shows, a Steadicam is used for a favourite shot that involves a 360-degree circle round the lead singer and then away. Well, the operator can time his move so that he's clear of other camera shots by the time he reaches the end of the shot. But scripting involves much more than getting out of each other's way. You can dictate the cutting rhythm of the song and vary it throughout. Scripting gives the director more control and more tools to make each of the 43 numbers look individual. Some classical songs only had 12 shots in the whole song, whereas some with a faster tempo had over 150. All this information is printed into a camera script, which is distributed to all relevant departments. By being explicit about how you're intending to shoot a number, you can inform when you're coming to, say, a wide shot or an audience shot, and the LD can anticipate that. For those interested in the broadcast side, Jeff expands further on this in our book. One of the indications that we had an unusual concert on our hands was the freedom from the oft-time very strict technical lighting riders for these world-renowned stars. This wasn't a festival or arena stage. We were actually in the middle of one of the busiest roundabouts in central London. I was very fortunate to have the advice and input from some of our performers' regular lighting designers to give us an insight into what those performers would expect to be comfortable with in terms of our lighting of them in this unusual venue. So thanks to Nick Whitehouse, LD for Kylie. Thanks to Andy Piggott, Special Shows LD for Sir Elton John. And thanks to Wally Lees, Lighting Director, and Leroy Bennett, Lighting Designer for Sir Paul McCartney. The lighting equipment was supplied by Negearth, and Crew Chief Fraggle and his boys and girls were excellent in their skill, demeanour and tenacity in some pretty awful weather conditions. I believe that any lighting design can only be as good as the crew that realise it. And the Times headline, "A Triumph of Illumination," is a tribute to all those involved. The fireworks and pyrotechnics were designed by Michael Lakin, and the OB engineering was overseen by David O'Carroll, with broadcast maestro Chris Bretnall in overall technical charge of the hundreds of cameras used for the BBC's coverage of the Diamond Jubilee weekend. It's also worth considering that the entire concert had to be struck by dawn the following day to allow foreign broadcasters a clear view as they prepared for the day's pomp and circumstance. An amazing feat of production in and of itself, so congratulations Robbie Williams Productions for that. One of the fascinating aspects of our work on large events is that we become responsible as directors of photography for every visible image, whether it be for the live audience, for the 17 million viewers on TV, for the national and worldwide press, or for every other media from YouTube to t-shirts and teacups. And attention to detail is fundamental to a successful event, even though it often goes unnoticed. Camera 33, for example, had a few stray branches in shot for the balcony sequence, and so a quick word from me to our excellent and well-humoured production team of event designer Malcolm Burkett, site manager Albert Lawrence, and production manager Kenny Underwood, and they were disappeared by morning. According to the Royal Park arborists, anything under an inch in diameter is first-year growth and fair game for the chop. You learn something new every day. It was a fantastic event which created an unprecedented interest in lighting and projection from the public and press, and we were very proud to be part of it. Now we have some time left, so if you have any questions for Tim and I, please raise a hand and Emma will bring you a microphone. Thank you very much. Any questions at all? Emma?
Just quickly, in terms of smoke and fireworks and the smoke that comes from that, did you take advantage of that at all? Did you think about that at all?
Absolutely. I mean, I can probably describe that best from 2002 Diamond Jubilee, or the Golden Jubilee rather, when we had a lot of searchlights on the roof. We had 50, one for each one of Her Majesty's reign. And so there were two reasons why I wanted to use smoke. One was to connect the fireworks to the architecture of the building, because quite often with these shows, you'll see a shot of the building and then it becomes the fireworks, and you just see fireworks, 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 and you could be anywhere on the planet. So in that particular instance, we introduced a bit of dirty fireworks to create smoke, to make the beams visible. And then obviously in things like Live and Let Die, although we had cracked oil running all the way through it, and we're relying on wind direction as usual, something like that you can really take advantage of and really put in some impactful beam looks, knowing what's going to happen with that smoke. Great, well I love the fact we've done such a great presentation that there's absolutely no questions left in your minds. We've got one there.
Hey Durham, it's Jason at TP. With the network that you said you couldn't actually make the link between the MA1 and the MA2 system, was that Was that a software-specific thing, or was that a cabling thing, or what was that?
No, not at all. It was actually more of a physical connection. It wasn't about the choice of console. Had we been able to make a physical connection, we would have absolutely have linked the desks, and therefore Alex would have been able to inhibit or play with what Dave was doing. It was more the fact that any cables installed on site had to go through drain pipes, searched and sealed drain pipes 6 weeks before the concert. And decisions made in certain areas hadn't still been finalised in terms of control systems. And so therefore the opportunity was missed to install cables at that point. So essentially Dave was on the end of a radio at that point. And it's almost safer sometimes to have someone just at the end of a radio physically doing it when he's so far away. But yeah, it was actually a physical connection we couldn't make.
I mean, just to add to that, during the day, in the roundabout, we had all the pomp and circumstance of the changing of the guards, and the horses won't walk over cable tracks. So we had to clear all the cable that didn't go in weeks before, as Tim mentioned, every day, and wait for all that pomp and circumstance to finish, and then lay it all out again.
That includes all the three-phase cable, power lock, everything. So we didn't get the system until a certain point in the day after the changing of the guard.
I kind of thought that perhaps, because I had signal in my head, but obviously if there's power as well and various other bits and pieces.
If I can connect it, I will every time.
Yeah. So it wasn't something that could have been solved from like a wireless point of view.
No, for me, wireless is a dangerous world, and we both have experience of. We'll only use wireless as a last point of resort, and at this point, it wasn't felt that it was necessary to use wireless. Always, the rule of thumb on any show, big or small, for me and most people I work with, is if you can make a copper connection, you make a copper connection.
I mean, just to add to that, sorry, on the control side, a lot of the royal work we do around the world, if we use wireless, the royal protection officers turn up and they block everything. And so you lose all your wireless connection. No matter how good wireless systems are, and there are some great systems out there, personally, if you can't cable it and use the word go, as that's my network.
As an addition to that, we also said in London 2012 that there would be no wireless DMX on anything. We made a conscious decision right from the start, due to the sheer amount of frequencies being used in London this summer. Yeah.
Thanks.
Perfect. One more in the middle there.
Just a quick question regarding visualization. Was it something you could? Was this project, because the amount of detail that you went into, would it have been possible without visualization to the degree that you used it?
I think with the timescales we had, and the fact we were working in daylight with the system only being handed over to us once the changing of the guard had finished, the rain. Absolutely, and we weren't able to hang the system in LH2 and have a B system. Absolutely, we wouldn't have achieved it without WYSIWYG. And myself and Durham have done countless projects with WYSIWYG over the years, and both very happy with the system. And this was one of those shows where we could not have done it without a pre-visualization system. Yeah.
I mean, from a political point of view, the use of pre-visualization and pre-programming, again going back to the Golden Jubilee, everyone knew there were going to be fireworks outside the palace. Nobody knew anything about the projection and the lighting, because we'd created the whole thing in WYSIWYG. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, we spent 2 hours doing a focus, and that was the only time we put real light on the palace to stop tourists or broadcasters getting any images at all before the concert. So we couldn't have kept that light under a bushel without that technology. Great, well thank you very much for coming to listen to us bark on about the great fun we had on the 4th of June. Thank you.
Thank you, cheers.